all here this afternoon, ready to chat about leadership. So if I can share this. All right. Leanne, may I have a confirmation in the chat that you do indeed see my slides?
I can say it out loud. Yes, we are good to go. I can see you and your slides, and we are recording, so you're good to go.
Perfect. So welcome, everyone. I'm quite excited to be here. It's a great opportunity, and when I met Leanne for the first time, I love talking about leadership, and as you know, it's the topic of the day. So fostering leadership, it's also about the collective's leadership. So the leadership of everyone involved in your club. Some of you might wonder why I do this. Well, first, I was a coach. So a few years back, all the way up to 2017, I was a football coach. Back in the day where I had bigger shoulders, bigger biceps, you could say, bigger legs as well. I've changed quite a bit since that day. But the thing is, I was coaching and I was doing research at the same time. And then I realized that there was a lot of good research out there available to coaches, but it was not making its way to the field. So I figured that I could be one of those persons that would take the research and make sure to bring it to the coaches in a way that they could use. Because sometimes criticism that we hear about research is that it's not very practical, applicable. Well, I made it a duty to make sure that it was practical. And I also think as a coach, I had struggles. I'm sure you had some struggles as well. You have some struggles, or you had some struggles as well as a coach. And I think that we often help our athletes, but people helpers need help too. And coaches are people helpers. So why not help them? So that's why I kind of came into this role of being somewhat of a coach developer, a speaker, if you will, or a coach of coaches. Some of you have probably already noticed, I'm French. Okay, so no problem with that. If there's any mispronunciation that kind of confuses some of the concepts I'm talking about, no hesitation, write it in the chat. I'm totally open about it. I think I can only improve, but I think the message will come across just fine. So first and foremost, before we get going, if you're expecting something where I'm popping 150 slides with lots of figures, this is not what you're going to get. If you're expecting somebody who's going to be monotone and just talk on the same level, that's not what you're going to get. Even if we're from home, if we're here virtually, I'm going to try to be as dynamic as possible and make sure to convey the information. I like to believe that we're doing in the business of edutainment, making sure that you're a bit entertained, but you learn something along the way. So first disclaimer, I'm not a perfect leader, but do any of you know one? I'm sure you don't know any perfect leader. It's a challenge to be a good leader. And the thing is, it's not black and white. It's full of shades of gray. And I think I can offer an interesting perspective because I was a coach at one point. I studied leadership and I also experiment on a daily basis with coaches. And it's rare that you kind of have this mix of coaching, research, and also experimentation. So I think that can offer an interesting perspective and hopefully can help you in your coaching practice when at least things will open up again. So let's get to it. If you allow me, I have one story to share with you and then 3 key insights that I'd like you to take away. The first thing is, we think about the landscape of sport. So if you look at sport, there's so many things that are involved in it. We can talk about nutrition, we can talk about physical preparation, mental preparation. But in coaching, today we'll only look at one domain. And I think it's quite important to limit what we do to this domain because I'm not going to change your entire coaching, but hopefully I can provide some insights into making you a better leader and work on the leadership of your coaches within your club. So the topic is really specific to the leadership of performance groups. So if you're in a recreational environment, hopefully you can use it, but it's more tailored to performance groups. And as I said, leadership can be messy at times. I'm sure some of you have felt frustrated in the past. Have you ever felt frustrated because your athletes did not buy in? Have you ever thought that you weren't a good leader? Have you ever thought that your athletes actually could be better leaders and that people around you could be better leaders? I'm sure you've felt that because it's a challenge. Everybody is different, situations are complex, and then there's so many things that happen in the season. And then also one thing that's particular to competitive or / performance environments is that there's a high pressure to perform and a pressure to improve. And sometimes you show up to the club, you show up to practices, and actually you're a bit tired. And that's normal. And I mean, that's the challenge of leadership. So hopefully today I will help you move forward on that path. And that's my role. As I said earlier, I think that people helpers need help too. Well, hopefully I can help you and move you along that path. So to do that, I always try to bring a balance of scientific insights and concrete strategies I used in my coaching as well. So of course, we need to make sure we anchor everything that we do in research to make sure it's rigorous, it's valid, it has an impact. We just can't do anything that we want whenever we want. But also we need to show a practical mindset. So that's why I think bringing some strategies that I used in my coaching, I think that can be helpful to you. So by the end of the workshop, you should be able to achieve two things. First, understand and situate the concept of collective leadership within the management of performance groups. So whether you manage a team, whether you manage a club or a group of individuals, it's a performance group. It's people that are gathered together that are trying to achieve objectives in somewhat of pressure environments. The second thing that you should be able to do is know some leadership best practices that can be implemented in your club. So if you do those two things, I think you'll have a better understanding of how it fits in your program. And then the second thing is concrete strategies that you could implement. Let's say your gym would open tomorrow, and hopefully it's going to open pretty soon with this pandemic. So to do that, here's what I have in mind for you. First, I'll share a leadership story from my career as an athlete to kind of anchor a bit the concept of shared leadership, collective leadership, social leadership, and you'll know a bit more as I'm speaking, as I'm chatting with you, you know a bit more of why we use those words interchangeably. Then I'll explain to you why I think that managing a club is like taking care of a tree. Then we'll discuss the latest breakthrough in terms of leadership theory, something that has just been coming up in science, first published in around 2014, but then started in 2017 and is really gaining a lot of momentum. And you may see here on the slide that there's this complex flow chart, but don't worry, I'll walk you through it and I'll make sure you understand the major parts and the parts that make sense that you can actually use in your coaching. And then at the end, we will explore some ways of putting this into practice. So how can you actually do it? So is everybody okay with that? I know that all of you are probably raising your hands at home, so let's get to it. So as I said, the first part is really a story of my career as an athlete. Like I said, back when I was a bit younger, and some of you might wonder how old I am. No, I'm not 20 years old. I still struggle to grow a beard. I'm actually 30 and I have a daughter. But back in the days, I was part of something that you call a season in which you could say that I was part of two teams as a football player. So once upon a time, a younger and more athletic me, I was part of a team loaded with talent. The experts were saying that we could almost compete for the national championship, but we sure had a shot at the conference championship. And some of you might say, of course, Frank, you're going to say that it was your team. So of course you think that you guys had a team loaded with talent. You were part of it. Well, actually, we were ranked in the top 10 at the beginning of the season. So when you say ranked in the top 10, there's 27 teams in the country. There's not only 12, there's actually 27 teams in the country. And I think if I remember correctly, we were in the top 8. And usually you have 4 conferences, you're in the top 8, you have a chance to compete for the national championship. And most importantly, this ranking is created by the coaches. So it's the coaches within the league that kind of rank all those teams. So usually they have a good understanding of who had good recruits, who had good receivers, who had good talent. And to give you a bit of a sense of what the team was like, every day during the summer, as I was part of it, the players were leading workouts. The players were leading practices. And sometimes you'll have teams that coaches give them workouts and give them practices, and they go and then they run the practices detailed by the coaches. But actually, it was the players in that generation for that year that led the workouts and led the practices and created them. So you could tell that it was quite a team that had strong leadership, if you will, or at least had a sense of initiative. But then one day we came to the first practice. And then the first practice of the season, we're like, let's go. We're set for a big season. Let's get to it. And the captains gathered, and I was part of the captains who said, let's go. Let's start warm up 5 minutes early. We didn't know it at the time, but something big was going to happen because of that 5 minute early warm up. We start practice. Then the new coach runs onto the field like, what the heck is that? What are you guys doing? Like, no, we start practice at 10. Practice starts at 10. You don't start it early. And we're all taken aback. You're like, really? Like, we're starting the practice earlier. This is the kind of behavior you want to encourage, right? Autonomy, ownership, responsibility, all of these things. So as a captain, we were a bit confused, but then you do your practice, you go through it, and then the new coach gathers a meeting with everyone, all the players, all the coaches. And in that meeting, he calls us the so-called captains. And because of that, there was a literal explosion within the team. Former leaders felt conflicted. Like, I'm trying to help. We're trying to set the tempo of how things should be done and trying to win. But then our leadership was just cut under our feet. Informal leaders that were not sure where they rank within the team somewhat tried to take over. Not formally, of course, but they were like trying to be the new alpha dogs, if you will, and move up the ladder of the team. So you can imagine, I'm sure, that because of that call that was made and this decision to start the warm-up 5 minutes early, there was a lot of internal conflicts within the team. So because of that, the season actually started pretty terribly. If I can remind you, we were ranked in the top 10 with high expectations. And we start with 5 losses in a row. 5 losses in a row after having been ranked in the top 10. The coach is fired. Some of the coaches, they stop coaching. Some stay, but they don't want to kind of be too involved because of this kind of weird situation. So they just give us feedback, at least for the first week. And then after that, they start helping us. So we don't have coaches. We're totally independent. You just have the group of captain. So players are like, we can abandon or we can continue. So players take over, and then the captains started running practices for a week in the middle of that season. So you had captains or in each of their position group running practice, telling the drills, and myself, I had to run to see the offensive captains, and the offensive captains would run, come to see me to see where you're going. But you're doing that at the same time as you're trying to work on your footwork and make sure you're getting ready for the game that you're going to be playing against Queens, or I don't remember exactly what team, but you see where I'm going with this, right? So actually, for the next 2 weeks, we win our game. So we win 2 games in a row. So after having started with 5 losses, we then win 2 games. And then we create some momentum. And lots of us, I think if it something around 20 players, it was our last season. And we get to the final game of the season. And then we face Western University. Western University, for those of you that don't have a big understanding of the football landscape in Canada, Western University is usually a football powerhouse. They're a bit almost as good as University of Ottawa. But we get to that final game and we actually have a chance to make it. So after being ranked in the top 10, then we lose 5 games, we win 2, led by the players, running practices and running the systems, and then having help from new coaches that just drop in to make sure we could finish the season. We still have a chance to make it. It's unbelievable. So we start the game, it's a tough fight, it's a tough battle, and then with 1 minute left, it's tied. So if we win this last minute, we actually make it to the playoffs. But the thing is, Western has the ball. So they have the ball, and then they move up the field, and we fight, and we fight, and we fight. And then with 4 seconds left, they get around something like the 30-yard line. So close enough to put the ball between the goalposts and score some points. They line up. We line up as well. We bring out our field goal block. They set. They hike the ball. They kick it, and they win. Game over. Day 1, we lost this damn game. We're out. Our season is over after having going through this roller coaster. After all this stuff, we were this close. And if you think about it, it was really like we were 2 teams. We were 0-5 for more than half the season, and we're 2-1, and the only game we lose is against a powerhouse. We were so upset. And talking with the captains and the players after this season, we wondered what would happen if we had had good leadership. But then that might be the question you have. What is good leadership? And we were really an inch away. Now you might wonder, how does this relate to gymnastics? And are you going to talk to us about football coaching and football for the entire hour? No, this is not what's going to happen. I think this relates highly to gymnastics coaching because regardless of the setting, athlete leadership impacts performance. For example, with a strong head coach, and you could say weak athlete leadership, we were 0-5. With strong athlete leadership and cohesion, with maybe less assertive coaches, we were 2-1. And really, if you think about your gym and your clubs, athlete leadership impacts the culture of the training environment. And that's really where it's strong because there's more dedication to the practices. There's more intention. And we often think of the concept of deliberate practice when we talk about athlete development. There's more deliberate intent to improve in the training environment. That's why athlete leadership is so important. And also, as I asked the question, how does this relate to gymnastics and gymnastics coaching? Well, leadership is usually, from my understanding, I don't know squat about the different techniques in gymnastics, but my understanding of working with several different sports and having worked with gymnastic coaches in the past is that leadership is less formally structured in individual sport. In football, you have a very tight hierarchy that imposes a chain of command. And in gymnastics, or at least in individual sport, usually the structure is a bit more horizontal in the sense that there is more formality. It's less like the military. So if it was important in a vertical structure, the athlete's leadership, imagine how important it is in a more horizontal structure. So the first takeaway I have for you today from this story, and we'll come back to it, is the ability of a group of individuals to perform is directly correlated to the relationship between formal and informal leaders. So it's really that dynamic of the captains and the informal leaders that are underneath or next to them, however you want to phrase it, that has a huge impact. Because the comments and this practice starting 5 minutes early, this relationship was terrible for the first few weeks. But then it settled down for the last 3 weeks. There was better cohesion. It showed on the field, but most importantly, it showed in the training environment. And that's where the power of collective, social, shared leadership resides. So this is where we start and kind of started to play with this idea of collective leadership. I use collective because it's the sum of the individuals working together, coming together as a collective, if you will. You'll hear some people talk about shared leadership, social leadership, but to me, it's collective. It's the sum of all the people together, the power of the group. Because we often think of leadership, and especially with the documentary that just came out during this pandemic, right? The Last Dance. We look at Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan, and we see those glorious individuals saving the world and doing those great things. But really, I always, and I'm sure you had this feeling too, that yes, we think of these great individuals that do those great things, but doesn't the group have power? If you go in the International Space Station and you're Chris Hadfield and you're the best leader possible, but the other four try to go in a different direction totally, well, the group's going to go in a different direction. The group has a lot of power. And that's exactly my point, is that, yes, it's important to take care of the individual and be a good leader. Of course, you want to set the example. But the group has a lot of power, and it's about time we recognize it. So to me, the idea is that managing a sport program is it's like managing a tree. It's like taking care of a tree. And basically, we often think of physical preparation, technical preparation, and tactical preparation. To me, this is the core of the tree, the trunk, the biggest part. We also hear people say that mental preparation is 80% of the performance. If you have just the basic of everything, but you have 80% of your performance is mental preparation. I would argue that mental preparation, it's important. Don't get me wrong. I have some friends that are sports psychologists after all, but it's actually important. But if you look at it, it's more like the trees. If you have a good trunk, you have a solid tree, and then when the sun comes out, you shine, you're beautiful, you're able to rise to the occasion. That's mental preparation. But then you may ask, where is leadership in all of that? To me, it's like the roots. It's the roots of your tree. If you have good leadership, you have a healthy tree. If you have bad leadership, your tree is going to rot. And this is where it fits in all of that. So as a coach, you have to take care of the roots. And really, science shows that there's 3 aspects you need to consider when you take care of leadership. So there's leadership, as you can see at the roots. There's vision and culture, the objectives, the norms, the rules, the behaviors, where you see things evolve. There's the individual leadership, the glorious people that can do great things and lead great groups. But there's also the power and the dynamic of the group. So today we'll really make sure that we focus on the collective leadership, to emphasize it again. But I would like to ask you a couple of questions to invite you to reflect. How do you make sure you have great individual leaders? How do you communicate your vision and your culture strongly? How do you ensure that your group has effective leadership? We, of course, pay attention to the last one, but I think the first 2 are quite important to reflect on as well. So if we can come back to leadership story, you could argue that the individual leadership was terrible and good at times. That the coach perhaps had good leadership, he was assertive, he was trying to do good things. You had captains that were probably bad leaders at times, but were also showing good leadership, taking initiative and leading the workouts and wanting to take responsibility of the success of the team. You had informal leaders that wanted to contribute to the team. But really, the collective leadership, the cohesion, was terrible at first. And then it became excellent for the second part of the season, and the results were directly correlated to that. So after this explosion, the dust came down, and we were able to do something with it. So even if the situation is really bad in your club, the cause is not lost. So then,
Frank, can I just jump in with a question here quickly?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, could you please explain the horizontal structure of leadership in gymnastics compared to other sports?
We're gonna get to it a bit later if you don't mind. Thank you, Doriana, for your question.
Oh, excellent. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna cover it a bit more in social identity approach, and then I think we can expand a bit further that. But thank you for your question, and I'll get to it at least for a part of it in the social identity approach, exactly there. So I'm glad to see that you're following along, Doriana. Okay, so then we get to the second step. So collective leadership brings us to the social identity, how we gather around a group and how we identify with the group. Because basically the identity of the group dictates the direction that the group's going to take. And most importantly, the identity of the leader needs to match this group. Because if the leader don't match the identity of the group, they're going to stay away, they're going to separate, and the followers will not follow them. So it's really an interesting dynamic. So it really changes from this idea that we had vertical leadership to a society now that has even more horizontal leadership, and individual sport that would have more horizontal leadership. Again, I just want to set the stage for myself for my answer later on. I'm not an expert in individual sport, but I think I have somewhat of a functional understanding. We'll see that later when I answer the question. So then, exactly the part related to the question is vertical leadership is really like a hierarchy. It empowers the individuals that are at the top, but those individuals and the people that are underneath must respect the chain of command. So in a football team, for example, you have the coach, you have the assistant coaches, and then communication needs to go between those people. And then the assistant coaches and the captains talk with the assistant coaches, and some of the captains will talk with the head coach. But not everyone is allowed to go to the head coach. And then after that, you have the athletes, and then you have seniority, and then you have all of that. And it basically says that in order to communicate to the boss at the top, you need to follow the path and you need to follow the chain of command. And it assumes that leadership is about formal position. But I'm sure you see that you're not necessarily a great leader because you have a formal position of a leader. We have various examples from south of the border, I guess. Then you have horizontal leadership. Horizontal leadership really considers that everyone influences the group. And because you have a set of individuals, and here I'm trying to answer Doriana's question, because as you have more people that are a bit more independent. If I understand correctly, many of the gymnasts are independent performers. They're not working necessarily as a group, whereas in football it's very compartmentalized. So you have that group who's represented by a person, and then it goes up to higher in the hierarchy. But really, horizontal leadership assumes that it's about everything and that group of individuals together making sense of what they are and what they are trying to achieve. So the challenge in horizontal leadership, in an horizontal leadership structure, it's about making sure that everyone shares the identity of the group. Because otherwise, you have people that will remain marginalized outside of the group, and then they will not contribute. Or maybe the leader will be marginalized and they will pull the group. The group's going to pull the group in a different direction than the leader wants to bring it in, if that makes sense. So it's really more informal, it's a bit more dynamic, it's a bit more organic. So that's why it's a bit, in my opinion, it's a bit more present in individual sport where there's this less of this formal structure. Of course, there's a club manager and there's a director, there's a high performance directors, there's coaches, there's athletes underneath. But my understanding is that athletes do not necessarily have this formal structure of captains and all of that going underneath compared to, for example, the football example I gave earlier. So most of our interactions operate very much in the second aspect. And this is, if I can make a tangent, because my specialty is learning, in this age of information, the world is becoming more and more flat because everyone can access anywhere in the world. And leadership is a bit more shared because more people have voices, because more people have a platform to share their voices. In the past, well, I was not there in the 80s, but the communication structure were a bit different. So let me share a great takeaway from a study of 2,500 people that was performed or conducted in Belgium. Out of those 2,500 people, there was 1,000 coaches and 1,500 athletes. So it's quite a massive study. And we're getting to the figure. And the takeaway from this figure is that the perceived leadership quality leads to greater collective efficacy. And if you have greater collective efficacy, you have better outcomes. So in my words, better leadership leads to better belief in your performance, in your mission. And if you have better belief, bigger belief, greater belief, you have better outcomes. So by improving the quality of the leadership, you get people to believe more strongly in the mission. And if they believe more in the mission, the overall performance of your group is better. But the thing is that leadership is not only one thing. There are actually 4 roles of leadership, and they are here on the left. If you pay most attention to the second line of each of these boxes, first, there is the task leader, the motivational leader, the social leader, and then the external leader. And if you have good leadership in those 4 roles, you will have better leadership overall in your club, and then more collective efficacy, and then better outcomes. But the value and the interesting thing is that the most important leadership is task leadership. So somebody that takes charge, for example, of the practices, making sure drills are run well, making sure that athletes participate to their training and follow the routine. Because yes, coaches can give, and strength conditioning coaches can give program and exercises to do. But the athletes at the end of the day decide how well they do it, coming back to this concept of deliberate practice that I mentioned earlier, but also how well do they do it and are they focused on the task? So within your coaching staff, you might have some task leader, and within your athletes, I'm sure in your club, Doriana, for example, you have some task leader, people that follow those instructions to the letter and make sure that everyone follow along. And actually what they've shown is it's the most important to ensure, the most impactful to ensure that you have quality leadership in your club and in your team environment. And if you have that, then you have better belief in the mission. I'll get to that point a bit later on with more stronger arguments for the side of the mission. But then also what they've shown in this theory, if you keep going down the boxes here on the left, is that the social leader is the second most important leadership role in your club. Making sure that you have someone there that takes initiative for the non-gymnastics related events, if you will, with your coaching staff or within your team, because it's important. The cohesion, the informal conversations are important to make sure that when people get to the training environment, first, they want to be there. And second, that they help each other. Because again, coming back to my first argument, it's about the culture of the training environment. And if the leadership, the group's leadership quality is high, you'll have better culture in the training environment. And then they've shown that you need to have a motivational leader, somebody that's going to bring more emotion, is going to be more upset when practices are bad, is going to be more enthusiastic, that's going to bring some energy to the table. I'm sure you have that in your coaching staff and in your athletes. And then there is the external leader. This is a bit for, I guess, the higher level of performance when you have responsibilities towards sponsors, high performance directors, and all of that. Is somebody that's going to talk to those people. So basically what they're saying is that in order to have leadership, good leadership, social leaders. And it's quite important if you want to go down all the way to the right and have successful team outcomes. And we say team, we're talking about the group here. And then the last thing that's important, and it goes back to this idea of collective efficacy. So the collective efficacy is the belief that people in the group can actually achieve the outcomes that they strive, and that's its worth following the leader's advice, the leader's suggestion, the leader's vision. And if you have good leadership quality, people will have greater collective efficacy. But that means that they will believe more strongly in the mission. But this is where the magic happens. Because they believe more in the mission, they'll dedicate more to it. They'll engage more with the process. They'll pay attention to the daily details more strongly than if the leadership is bad. So improving the collective leadership brings people to actually put more effort in what they do and take care of the process and help each other more, as we see on the right with the subscale of unity. So it's kind of amazing, right? We don't realize sometimes we think of, oh, we don't have good leadership, that's why we're having problems. But here we have the answer. Because we have better leadership, people put more effort and they focus more on the process. And that's what's leading to better outcomes. And as you know, I'm sure you are all aware of that if you want to reach your outcomes, you want to focus on the process. Well, that's what good leadership does. Because people believe in the greater mission, they take care of their stuff, not to say the other S word. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense for everyone, and we're going to keep going and we'll come back to it with the questions. Give me one second here. Perfect. So if we come back to the story, the success of the second phase, at least in my opinion, can be explained. Because in the second phase of the season, you had a great social leader, the guy at the bottom left here, Tyler Sawyer. He would be the life of the party, always bring energy to the practices. He would organize also some events on the Saturday nights or maybe the Wednesday nights to make sure that guys stick along, even though we had 5 losses in a row. You had the external leader, the quarterback, of course, Aaron Colburn, great guy. He would be very good at talking to the media, making sure that we were represented, our voice was heard, talking to direction. Then you had the motivational leader, Brendan Gillanders. You're still able to see him on TV. He's playing in the CFL right now. And he would come to the other players on the team and talk about the identity, what types of values we want, what type of practices we want, and what type of effort we want in the training environment, because he had been there with me for 4 years. And then myself, now being a doctor of coaching, you can imagine that 9 years back, I was already paying attention to coaching courses and all of that. So I would try to experiment with practice plans and give them to the players, and the players would follow that as well. But then the question you might have is, what can you do in your club? Well, the first thing I'd say is, on the left, establish a system. Who will be in your subcommittees for each of the function? Who are your coaches or athletes in your club who can take care of the task leaders, who can be social leaders, motivational leaders, and external leaders if it applies to your environment? But the second thing, and that's more like a frustration I had as a coach, we always say that we want better leaders, but do you evaluate leadership? And here on the right, what you see is the evaluation form I had for my players. And at the bottom right, you can see that in character development, there's a leadership piece. And my former supervisor always said that people don't care about something until you evaluate it. If you evaluate it, it's so surprising how fast they're going to improve it. Well, we evaluate technical, physical fitness, but do we evaluate leadership with our coaches, with our athletes, however it applies in your club? So this brings me to the first and only learning activity, because we only have 55 minutes. I have a couple of questions for you, because I don't want this to be a monologue, folks. I hope it's not a monologue and monotone. But the second thing is, I think it's important that we reflect as we are learning to make sure that we can apply some of the things that we hear about. Because if I just go on and talk for 60 minutes, it doesn't mean that you'll have taken some time to put it into practice and try to implement it in your coaching. And that's really what drives me. And I hope you get that sense since the beginning. So what are we going to do? First, I'm going to stay a bit silent for a minute. I'll time that minute using my Fitbit. And I want you to reflect on the identity of your group and the type of leader that you are within that club. So individually, of course, I want you to take 2 minutes, one for each task. First, to write down 3 characteristics about the shared identity of your group. What type of group do you have on hand? Is it a serious group, a fun group, a driven group, something like that? So I'm going to start my timer. I want you to do that. Then the second thing is write down a typical sentence your athletes say when they talk to you about their performances. Sentences that may be like, oh, I can't be as good as her, or I'm the best in my club, I'm doing the best tricks, and all of that. So I want you to take 2 minutes, one for each, to do that. Ready, set, go. One more minute, one more minute. All right, 10 seconds, and then we'll start again. All right. Thank you, everyone. I know all of you have taken the time to write it down. And I'm actually serious, even though I said smiling. But it's quite important. I'm sure you've all attended lectures or classes that, we go through slides and we see content. But then how do we apply it? And then I have one further question for you. What is the leadership role that you most identify with? And I'd like you to write it down in the chat. Or we tried to organize a quick poll and it's not really working right now. So no need to know like the process of it, but we had a poll. It's not working, but I'd like to take an informal poll. So if all of you, the 25 of us, could take the time to say, what is the leadership role you most identify with? And write it down in the chat. Write it down in the chat. It's not identity, it's identify. My apologies for that typo. So write it down in the chat if you could. What is the leadership role that you most identify with? So we have 2 task leader, 3 task leader, a motivational leader. Task. Oh, we have some serious people here. Okay, perfect. Motivational, Courtney, awesome. Gary's a bit more motivational. Motivational is social. So Elvis is the person you want to talk to for a pint after practices, I guess. Or maybe I shouldn't say that. All right, Rebecca, social. Making sure that the group sticks together, glues together. Awesome. Okay. So it's important to think of that. But then my question that I have for you is, okay, we have a lot of task leader, we have some motivational leaders, we have a few social leaders, but do you have all the various types of leader? And I would say this is specifically for athletes, but I would say we need that within our coaching staff. A gymnastics club, from my understanding, can be pretty big. Well, do we have all of these people? Well, it tells us basically that the social is important as well. Okay, so thank you for sharing that and answering the question. So we'll move forward. Now, the final piece. The final piece is tribal leadership. Because basically what the social identity approach to leadership development tells us is that people gather in groups and then groups have certain power. Well, there's an interesting piece that was shared late in the 2000s, so around 2008, that talks about the dynamic of human leadership and saying that we gather in tribes. So basically the premise of this theory is that humans are social beings, that we form tribes, that we want to be with other people, and that really we gather in tribes of 20 to 150 people. We can't gather in tribes that more than 150 people. Why? Because it's hard to get a sense of a greater mission. But really that if we have more than that, we then subdivide in tribes. But really the key piece here that can be actually quite practical for you in your coaching is that tribes represent in language. The language that your tribe use, that your athletes use when they talk about their performances, tells you where the group is, or at least where that athlete is in the tribal leadership scale. So of course, this work comes from Logan, 2008. And basically in that tribal leadership, they say that people gather along 5 stages of leadership. And most importantly, before we go into the details of each of those stages, is that the group becomes more efficient as we progress. And the group takes the identity of where the most people are. If you have 50 people, well, you would likely want to have 40 to 50 people in stage 4 or 5, because this is where you'll be most efficient, even in team or individual sport. So basically what it says is that the first stage of tribal leadership, so stage 1, life sucks. It's people that are a bit antisocial, anarchists. It's people that want to remove from the group. We rarely see that in sport. For stage 2, it's people that think, I suck. My life is terrible. I'm not doing great. I'm not good at anything. They usually look at others and see them as great. But they have a hard time seeing themselves as great and, most importantly, capable. Then we have stage 3. Stage 3 is people that they think they're great and they know they're great and they want everyone to know it. And of course here, I'm caricaturizing, but you understand the point I'm trying to make. They see themselves a bit bigger than the other members of the group. But then your group gets to stage 4. It's people that really believe that we are great. We can do these great things. And then in stage 5, it's people that don't even think about the group. They just think that sport is awesome and sport can change the world. Sport can change life. And if your group has a lot of people like that, then you're at stage 5. But then the authors of these theories warn us, we often overvalue or oversituate ourselves along this continuum. But of course, it's always flexible. It's always moving. We can be at a certain place at one time and then come back to another place at another time. So let's go through these stages, because I think each of these stages can help you better lead your athletes and your group as a whole. So if you have an athlete in stage 1, they would say, gym sucks. This is pointless. Why are we even doing this? That tells you they might be at stage 1. What's important is to really set clearly the boundaries of expected behaviors. What are the expectations you have for your athletes? Are there set norms? And it's important that you're either in the group or you're out of the group. One thing, of course, it rarely happens in sport. And remember, it's really about setting the rules and expectations, but also maybe making people feel part of the group. It's hosting mundane events. And this brings us back to the importance of social leadership. The social leader, bringing that group together and making sure that everyone feels part of the training environment. If they feel part of the training environment, they'll put more effort into it. And then you get to the second stage. It's when athletes speak like this. Oh, I can't be like her. I can't be like him. Not my fault. My coach hates me. That's why I was cut. That's not why I was not selected. I'm sure you've heard that before. I've heard it. We'll continue to hear it. But that tells you that it's people at stage 2. If they can't progress, it's because other people are wrong. It's not their fault. And really what's important at that stage is to show that success is dependent on their own effort. If they put more effort into something, they will reach successes. And I think, personally, that's why sport is so influential, because it teaches that a lot to people. If you're practicing to be a gymnast, if you're practicing to be a football player, if you put more effort, you'll actually be able. Of course, talent will limit you at some point. We all know that. We're aware of that as coaches. But if you put more effort, you'll be able to bring it to the next step. And it's basically echoing the sense that hard work pays off. Well, basically, if you have a lot of people at stage 2, a lot of athletes at stage 2, or coaches at stage 2, you want to show them that. You want to tell them that hard work pays off. That if they put more effort, they'll move along. Well, to increase their sense of value, right? The NCCP talks a lot about valuing people. It's quite important. Well, one thing you can do to do that is know the names and ages of members and their personal circle. Know their hobbies. Don't limit your knowledge of your athletes only to their gymnastics prowess, if I can say that. Another thing you may want to do is assign projects that they can do well in a short amount of time. It's basically showing them that they can succeed. One example I have from the world of strength and conditioning is when you want to teach, you want somebody to start to run and run maybe a 5K, a 10K, or a half marathon. The first thing you do is you don't tell them to run a 5K. Tell them, go outside, just put your clothes, run around the block, and then come back in. You say maybe it's not enough to improve your physical health. But the thing is, it shows people that they can do it. And it's basically the same principle with gymnastics athletes. You create momentum when you do that, and you show them they're capable. And hopefully if you do that, they move on to stage 3. And now at this point, it's about, they know that if they put effort, they'll improve, they'll be successful. It's about showing that they improve faster with the collaboration of others, linking back to the idea of the training environment. People at this stage, they think that they've put more effort, they're doing great things alone, and other people in the group are not worth standing with them or practicing with them. But really, we all know that as coaches, if we give each other feedback, we'll create better training. And athletes, if they have other athletes contributing to their training and giving them feedback maybe while the coaches are doing something else, well, they're going to improve faster. And that's really the idea of this stage of leadership. So what you want to do is create activities in which they will need the help of another person. So creating activities where they need to be 2 to succeed. One thing you could do as well is to present or describe role models that exhibit stage 4 behaviors, people that contribute and take care of the group. So for example, if you were dealing with basketball players, you could talk about LeBron James and his school and showing how he's contributing to the lives of others, and you understand that it's about sharing the ball regardless of the situation. Then the challenge I have for you, how can you do that in your environment? Then if you have stage 4 people, it's really about creating a unity. It's great. They say, oh, maybe Canada is best in the world in gymnastics, or maybe they're talking about their provinces. I know we have people from various areas of the country here, but maybe it's saying, oh, Gym BC is great. Maybe gymnastics Manitoba is great. That's good. That's stage 4 behavior. But at the end of the day, if we want to improve and get even better, it's great. It's important to compete against other groups. So sometimes creating international or national collaboration, that's why it's helping, because we're working for the sport and it brings every subgroup higher. So one thing you want to do is, if you have people that you want people to be at that stage and stay at that stage, when they are facing challenges, you want to point that person to others for solutions. You might want to create an activity also where people discuss their values. And I know this can be cheesy, but it's important and it works. When you create an activity where people share values, you have wonderful discussions. And after that, you have more dedication in the training environment. Coming back to the motivational leader and this leadership quality, collective efficacy, and team outcomes figure that we just saw earlier. And then if you want people at stage 5, this is exactly what you want to do. As I said earlier, you create national collaboration projects, maybe competition or communities of practice, or a group of coaches with coaches of different provinces in Canada that work together in creating optimal training. Of course, If you share some secrets with another province, they're going to improve, but you might improve as well. And ultimately, people at that stage realize that if the other improves, I'm improving, and everyone improves, and we're doing better. And hopefully in Canada, it can be like that for gymnastics. And that's what I would challenge you to do. And I think we're doing great things from talking with Suzanne Fisher and I'm missing her name, but Heather also, but they're colleagues of mine. I know we're doing great things, but if we have this national collaboration, it's going to be even greater. But then I would challenge you how you do that even within your clubs, in your local area. So overall, what's important to remember is that your group needs to be the furthest on the right possible in order to be more effective, achieve its outcomes, and that their stages is represented by what they say. Do they say, gym sucks? Oh, I can't be like her. Oh, I have more medals than them. BC gymnasts are the best. Gym changes lives across the world. That tells you where we are. And the identity of your group matches the most people you have. So if you have 10 people that are at stage 4, but you have 40 at stage 2, you're going to be at stage 2, and you need to do activities. So then in the last 5 minutes, I have some concrete strategies to share with you. The first thing is if you want to get people from stage 2 to stage 3, well, use the rule of 2. I know it's coming from fiction and Star Wars, but it works. And we hear another name for this in coaching. It's the buddy system. That's why the buddy system works. It takes somebody at stage 2 that think they're lesser and somebody at stage 3 who thinks he's a greater. And then that person at stage 3 shows them the way and take them along. You can do it explicitly by grouping pairs in your training environment, in your meetings, or you can do it more implicitly by suggesting, oh, pair up. But I would suggest do it explicitly. I did it explicitly and it works. You look at the different people you have, you make them collaborate, improve, work together in the training environment, and that's going to what it creates. You're going to get more people at stage 3. Then what you want to do if you have people, a lot of people at stage 3 to bring them to stage 4 is make them work together. Something I call leadership trios. And basically what you want to create is groups of 3 for problem solving or value-based exercises. Well, one thing you can do specifically in gymnastics is create relay races where you give freedom to the athletes to choose their discipline. You give them a series of 3 types of jumps maybe that they can do or techniques, or you're the expert of that domain. But you create a relay race. But the thing is you don't tell them what they do. You let them sort it out. You gather groups of 3 and say, okay, you organize however you want. You each have to do 1 or 2 or 3 jumps or exercises, but it's the team that's going to have the best score at the end. It's going to get the first practice time on the mat or on the various exercises that you do. But really what it shows them is that other people are good at doing other things too, because they have to realize, oh, who's better than me at this? Oh, this person is better than me at this. So they'll see that others have value as well. And then the final thing, if you want to get people from stage 4 to stage 5, use a trick from Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer, in a world like football, one thing he does is a table of values. He clearly lines out his values, so respect, integrity, effort, but most importantly, associates one action with that value. So what is respect? Everybody has values. But when is the last time you gave a meaning to an action to your values? For example, respect. Respect is, I will not call people names, or I will always use coach before talking to my coaches. That's a concrete action. And then do that with your athletes, involve them in the process. And then they realize that really our sport, gymnastics, football, basketball, track, sport is bigger than our individual sport. And that's when you get people from stage 4 to stage 5. And actually what they've shown is that people put more effort in their work when they're at stage 5 because they know the greater purpose behind that sport. So in conclusion, I started by sharing a story where I invited you to walk in my shoes, looking at athlete leadership, coaches, informal leadership, and how that influenced performance. What I really wanted to tell you from that is bring leaders along, coaches, formal, informal. Everybody has a role in the group. Then I invited you to consider the 3 aspects of leadership: individual, collective, vision, and culture. Then focus on increasing the collective efficacy by taking care of the 4 leadership roles. And then listen to their language to better organize the activities that you do to match the identity of your group. So overall, this was a 55-minute journey where we only look at one aspect of the coaching domain. We covered interesting concepts, some examples, which is great, but nothing changes until you take action on those concepts. And this is my challenge to you. What is the first action you will do when things will return to normal, when your gym will open up again? What is the first action you'll do? So thank you for your time. If you have enjoyed, please tell Gym BC staff. If you want to know more, shoot me an email. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for leading our session today. How do you pronounce your last name?
Rodrigue. Everything. I don't pretend I don't read my emails, but I do answer everything as long as people are patient. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, everyone.
Perfect.
I'll welcome any questions if there's any.
Perfect. I don't see any yet, but there might be one that comes through just in the
Doriana,
final
did we answer
seconds.
Doriana's question?
Well, let's see if she
I truly care about it because it's important. Articulating the concepts, I think it's important. Because it's nice when you present it on a slide and nobody can argue against it, but we need to be able to discuss them. We'll take that for a yes.
Yes, I will take it as a yes too. Perfect. So yeah, thank you again to all the participants for taking part today. We really appreciate you guys giving up your afternoon here to listen and learn with all of our presenters. So thank you again for that. As always, we do accept any feedback from you guys. So if you have any feedback on the session today, anything for Frank that I can pass along, or if you have any feedback on upcoming webinars you guys want to hear about, please send information my way. We'd be happy to continue developing these as long as there is a need to do so. So thank you so much again for everybody. Thank you, Dr. Rodrigue. And
good job to, if I can just say something, good job to everyone for taking time to focus on your learning and being open to different ideas. I really value that, and good job everyone for being a learner. I mean, if everyone is learning, we're all getting better. So good job to everyone.
Awesome. So I think that's it for the day. Like I said, send any questions my way. But other than that, have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining.